Welcome to the Post Daily News Show. I am John Pollock alongside Wai Ting. It is Monday, April the 25th. Hello, Wai. How was your weekend?
My weekend was really good. Yeah, had some good time off. Watched a bit of F1.
I watched a
So
lot of F1. A lot of F1.
where are you at on Drive to Survive so
I'm
far?
only on season two. I am midway through season two, where Pierre Gasly is on the brink of like a breakdown, is what it sounds like, along with his car. It's fascinating. It's just I really am drawn not just to the eclectic personalities of some of these owners, but man, the mental anguish that these I was going to say fighters. It's like such a parallel, but to
It's
these
similar.
drivers that I mean, it is you have 21 races. And it's like your life's work is essentially at stake at each one of these. You lose a seat, it's like the mental toll. That's I've been reading so much about like all of these different drivers, and they all cite the same that like they'll look back at their careers, but it's like I loved my career, but the mental toll is not something I would ever want to go through again. It's unbelievable when you have like the millions of dollars that are being pumped in and you're hearing them like in real time reacting like when they pull up and Pierre Gasly finishes this race and the camera's just on him as he's reacting to this performance and there's just silence. It's riveting television.
Completely, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, so much of this you don't really understand when you're just watching the sport. It's very much like MMA, where I think if you're just watching the fights themselves, you could be a fan for like the knockouts and whatnot. But for me, like what really drew me into a sport like that, or really any like a sport like F1, is to understand the stresses of the people behind it, and you don't really get that until you see maybe some form of reality TV that's able to completely exemplify it. But yeah, the parallels to combat sports, I think, are very apparent because you're talking about high pressure situations where every match is essentially a championship match. You mentioned the amount of money that gets put into every single race. You think about the people and the careers. Every single point is potentially millions of dollars.
So on the weekend, while I'm catching up, and I'm not up to where you are all caught up to date, correct? On Drive to
Yeah, I
Survive. You
I finished this weekend. I got all caught up for the race yesterday. Yeah.
well, I'm only at season two, but I was introduced over the weekend to Toto Wolff,
Oh,
my
yes.
favorite character. This guy, first of all, I've talked about the fact that season one, it's like Ferrari and Mercedes are almost like the magicians behind the curtain that like you don't have any access to this team. They're just finishing 1-2 every single race, but you don't get anything. And in season two, I'm not up at a part where they've really got into Ferrari, but there's much more Mercedes in season two. A lot of Lewis Hamilton, a lot of Toto Wolff. This man is something else because I watched the race on Sunday and they interview him afterwards after the race. Are F1 spoilers a thing we really have to address? Can we talk a
No.
little bit about Sunday?
Yeah, you can. You
Okay.
can. Oh, well, okay. If you're watching Drive to Survive, you don't want to keep up with the current thing. Then yeah, tune out for the next
Okay.
minute.
Is it okay if we talk about this off the top? Should we go through? Can we talk about this now, or do you want to wait? I don't know if
You
we're,
could talk
we're
about it now.
okay. This is our show. We can chat about whatever.
Yeah.
So, Mercedes. I'm catching up on this current season. Watching this race on Sunday morning. I was up very early and I was watching everything. And it is down this season. It's a big battle between Ferrari and Red Bull, and Mercedes that had been this behemoth throughout the last decade. They're having a lot of struggles this season way with Lewis Hamilton, who had a poor showing on Sunday, and Toto Wolff is interviewed afterwards. This post race coverage, it's amazing. Like
It's
there are
fantastic.
like I'm watching like TSN carries like the Sky Sports like wrap up afterwards, and they're interviewing all the drivers, and you have the hosts who are essentially like they call out bullshit on the certain things, but like well, they're blaming Mercedes is blaming the car troubles on Lewis Hamilton, which is fine, but George Russell finishes P4. And that's what's so fascinating about this is like you have this out of car problems, but you have two drivers. And if one's finishing fourth and the other is having a terrible performance like Lewis Hamilton, how much is on the driver versus how much is on the car? And they asked Toto Wolff about, man, Lewis Hamilton. He's like, yeah, that was very bad. That was very bad. It's amazing theater at the top of it all. Like they're very much I just love getting into like the stories of it all, and this coverage was just fascinating.
Yeah, to me, that's one of the things that absolutely stands out most about it is the incredible access. I mean, from what I hear, like even media, gets like that typically cover a sport like this gets a lot more access than maybe compared to other sports, and it's maybe only something you can really do when you're in a controlled environment, maybe like an F1. And the fact that there are only so many personalities attached to the sport at any given time. I mean, we're talking 20 seats, for one particular season. And then you have your principals on top of that. You get familiar with pretty much everybody very quickly.
They had the top 3 drivers from the race on Sunday, and they're in this like back room area, just like decompressing.
Oh,
and the broadcasters
amazing.
are just like, let's listen in. And we're just suddenly listening to them having like a private conversation, the 3 of them. It's unparalleled access. You would never get that. Like, we're going to go at halftime into the Patriots locker room and, hey, let's just listen in.
Well, like in the UFC, maybe you might get some moments where, like, they'll check in with the locker room, but yeah, it's great, absolutely. My favorite is like getting to hear some of the conversations between the drivers and the coaches on the headsets themselves, especially in the moments of like high stress, and sometimes like these come out on the internet after the fact, and you gain a whole lot more insight into some of the dynamics between the coaches.
You
and
are
the
14
drivers.
seconds behind. Understood.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But yeah,
There's the
it was
DRS.
yeah, dude, I went all into like, what is this stuff?
DRS,
Like, looking up
yeah.
all this. Like, I'm fully in. I'm listening to podcasts. I'm
Me
reading
too.
articles. Like,
We'll share podcasts after this.
I found one. The one I'm a real big fan of. Let me get the proper name out here. The Race F1 podcast. That's
Okay.
one that I'm listening to. There's also Inside Line.
Okay. I've been listening to the Checkered Flag from BBC. It's got some
Okay.
of the people that are involved with the broadcast. WTF1 is
Yeah.
a fun channel with a lot of interesting stuff. So anyway, I like, to me, people, we're alienating, I'm sure, like a huge chunk of our audience, but at the same time, for me, what I gain out of it is like I am falling in love with a brand new sport. Okay, and John is as well. And for me, I gain a lot of insight into what are my habits as a new viewer of a new sport, and how does that relate to professional wrestling when it's trying to get a new fan involved as much as we might be involved into F1, or as coverage, or as journalists, what is the process of somebody getting involved in falling in love with, for instance, professional wrestling, and then eventually finding a product like ours.
I've relayed all of that to our own thinking. Like, just when I'm looking for these podcasts, like, I'm looking for ones that, number one, it's like brief enough that, a 20-30 minute podcast is going to be more appealing to me to just jump into it and just get the basics. Like, we're coming at this from like a total like outsider perspective. And I think it's very valuable to look at the wrestling industry about like what is going to hook a new viewer based on something like this, and what you kind of navigate if you just dive into and are exploring a whole new world that you're not aware of, that are based around these personalities, and has had this breakout hit on Netflix that has just led to such growth. And on top of it, like, again, we talk about like media rights all the time. That's a huge thing for F1 this year when their rights are up with ESPN at the end of this year. And I'm sure we will be tying in F1 with, future wrestling and MMA media rights.
To me, personalities and storytelling is always the key when it comes to getting somebody interested in sports. And maybe the WWE is onto something with all of these sort of A&E specials. We got this Vince McMahon stuff that's coming out next year. Those might be your gateways.
Well, we will continue to chat about this. Are you ready for Miami in 2 weeks?
It's on Mother's Day, so I don't exactly.
Oh, is
that
that
might be a
Mother's
bit
Day?
tougher to watch for some of us, but I'm definitely in. By the way, on the Discord, there's a bit of like points. Like Phil Chertok is the master. He set something up so you can set up your predictions for the next race and everything. So there's a lot of fun going on there.
This is the season of Max Verstappen. This guy is just something else, man.
Well, you're clearly not caught up like all the way to season 4. Anyway, I won't say anymore.
I don't care. You can chat about whatever. But the last thing is that did you watch live?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Okay, I was watching live as well.
Did
Like,
you
what
watch
a
the
start
multiple
to this
cameras?
race.
Were you watching on the
I didn't
TSN
get into
app?
the app, but they were promoting that on the broadcast. And it's like I said, like this thing is pretty much commercial free. They'll do the occasional picture in picture, but they
Yeah,
are not breaking. And that
it's just like
apparently is
Dynamite. Yeah.
yeah, that's apparently one of the big things is that they want this giant rights increase. And like if you're staying with an ESPN or going elsewhere, like if they're going to invest that much, it's like you're going to have to interrupt this with more with more invasive commercial advertising, and that will infuriate race fans that are just accustomed to you are always on the track, you are always seeing the race from start to finish.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Production wise, I'm very interested in it because you're not just talking about let's say WWE and their responsibility to primarily USA or AEW and primarily their responsibility to TNT. This is a worldwide global sport. It truly is, and so you're dealing with different types of formatting across the entire world. So really, like, how do you make everybody happy?
All right, well, let's move on to the wrestling portion of the show. I could just chat about this all day.
The F1 climax is what I'm dubbing it.
Oh my goodness, that's a really good one. Well, we start off with some sad news, and that is the passing of Karl Lauer, who was such an instrumental force with the Cauliflower Alley Club going back decades. He held multiple different roles. He was the chairman of the board for the group up until 2015, when health issues had slowed down those duties. He was 83 years old. This is someone that he was in the U.S. Air Force. He
just to hold you off. I'm pulling up a Greg Oliver obituary right now. That's listing his age at 84, just so that we can.
Okay, sorry. My 84 years of age then is listed there. So yes, he had been involved he was in the U.S. Air Force. That's where he met his wife, who passed away a number of years ago. And then his wrestling connection came, like he was born in Chicago and then grew up in Los Angeles. And so he was attached to like the California scene, promoting wrestling with Gory Guerrero. And then on his own, he promoted shows at the Olympic Auditorium, which was the major, which was the building that the LaBelle family ran for so many years and would rent out up until 1982 when the building was sold, and that was the end of LaBelle Promotions. But he promoted there. He promoted in Las Vegas. He did this concept of mixing pro wrestling with stock car racing. Obviously, a marriage that he understood at a very early infancy of the tie-in between racing and professional wrestling.
Clearly, yes.
So, I would have loved to have known his thoughts on
him and Bob Holly.
That's right. There was a marriage that was always there that we just were not quite aware of. And I mean, he was also one of the few people that had a license to promote pro wrestling in California. So when major companies had to go there, you would need to get someone's license. And Karl Lauer was one of those people, along with Roy Shire. And then most are going to associate him with the Cauliflower Alley Club, which Gory Guerrero was the bridge between Lauer and the Cauliflower Alley Club, which was pretty much like a closed door convention just among those in the industries of pro wrestling, of boxing, of acting. And then they opened it up to where fans could go, and they greatly have expanded their membership. And I mean, I've gone to the Cauliflower Alley Club twice. I went the first time in 2006, and Karl was kind of my person that I dealt with those times going down there. I did not know him very well, but I had conversations with him. And that first year going, it was 2006 that myself and Dan Lavransky went in Las Vegas. And it was one of the most frustrating experiences because we went down there and we coordinated all these sit-down interviews. And we had, first of all, we had to deal with the fact that a lot of these figures, this was 2006, but many of them were still very guarded about sitting down and talking and not being familiar with who we were either. So it was Gary Hart that kind of was the first one that sat down, did an interview with us, and he kind of passed it along to the other guys, and that was worth its weight in gold to have Gary Hart kind of give the okay to others. And we got, Larry Hennig, Harley Race, Nick Bockwinkel, Oliver Humperdinck. We did, I want to say, like between 6 and 8 sit-down one-on-one interviews at that one in Las Vegas. And we come back, and these things never see the light of day. And it was so frustrating because we had shot these. I don't know what the issue was, but they never made it to air. I think we were able to extract a bit of audio to just run on the law. But the fact that these never ran, my head was spinning. Just that, like, what did we do this for? You know what I mean? You flew us down to Vegas for multiple days. We hired a camera operator for this, I think maybe two of them. And, running all of this, like, it was very stressful for me producing all of these and lining all this stuff up. And they never ran. But that was my Cauliflower Alley Club story in 2006.
Yeah. I mean, that's, the spending that was going on at our former employer during those early days is a story for a different time, of course. But, for me personally, I mean, doing a bit of reading up on Karl Lauer just today, clearly somebody who, was very selfless in what he wanted to give back, to the business. For me, I don't really know much about the Cauliflower Alley beyond, their Hall of Fame ceremony, but can you maybe discuss to the audience exactly what the Cauliflower Alley Club does?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, like, it's a group that they have memberships. You can have either a yearly membership or a lifetime membership, and it goes towards helping a lot of wrestlers that are having problems, that are down on their luck, whether it be health-wise or other. So they do a lot of good in terms of the funds that they raise. And then once a year, they get together, typically in Las Vegas, and do several. It's usually over the course of 3 days, culminating in a banquet dinner where various members are honored, and it's speeches. Like, honestly, it's if you're someone that has gone to the WWE Hall of Fame, like, to me, it's kind of a ceremony that it's much more relaxed, and you get speeches that are not constrained by time and language and such. And I've enjoyed it. The only times I've gone have been 06 and 2010, but it's also one where just so many different walks of life within professional wrestling will congregate. And sadly, a lot of, like, the major forces, they're getting older and they're passing along. So that's unfortunate, but that's just the reality of it all. WWE has had kind of like a mixed relationship with them over the years, but it sounds like over the past few years, they've been sending representatives and been supportive of the Cauliflower Alley Club. But it's something that I would say, if you have the means to go there, any person that, like, is interested in the history of wrestling, it's totally worth going. I would love to go back to another one at some point, but yeah, they've just announced their convention for September this year in Las Vegas. But I would definitely recommend it, because there's not too many things in the industry quite like it, that gather that amount of people over different generations.
Yeah, I mean, I think it remains one of the few things that, it continues to preserve some of the prior like pre-Hogan era, legacy of professional wrestling that's out there. And Karl Lauer really at the forefront of this great organization. So rest in peace.
We had several events going on over the weekend, including Impact's Rebellion pay-per-view that featured Josh Alexander winning the Impact Championship and getting the celebration with his wife and son Jet in the ring. That was thwarted by Moose back at Bound for Glory in October. This was just such a cool entrance. Alexander comes out with his son, who's dressed up in his dad's gear, walking him to the ring. It was like such a cool moment of just walking out and then watching it ringside with his wife Jen. And then, they had, I thought, like, a very good match where you got a chance to see it as well. I would say of the show, I would recommend the main event, the triple threat for the X Division Championship, and Jonah against Tomohiro Ishii. Those would be the three standout matches from the show. And I would say in this day and age, if you're getting, three really quality matches, that makes for a pretty positive response to a show.
It does, but I heard you question, on your post show on the Post Wrestling Cafe, John, about, like, we get 3 great matches every week. Like, we get more than 3 great matches every week on free TV. On an edition of Rampage, you might sometimes find 3 great matches. So, what does Impact have to do to necessarily entice an audience to pay for the specific set of 3 matches? But I will say, I thought, like, I got to see the main event, and I thought, as a long-term story, they managed to carry this through 2 cycles, and I thought the culmination was wonderful. Exactly, I think, what you wanted, that maybe audiences didn't necessarily get fully last time around. The entrance, I thought, was very memorable. His son is absolutely adorable, dressed up as a mini version of him, and I thought Moose did a fantastic job, throughout the match as the heel, and it was a very satisfying culmination to this story.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we have started the build now towards Jet and Brody Jr. I mean, this could be this could be an interpromotional match decades down the road. We shall see. It's a great point though. Like you can I watched this show. I found it like a very a show that it did drag at times, especially like the Tasha Steelz Rosemary match that preceded the main event. Like that was one where the audience just seemed like they were pretty restless during that match, and it affected the match. So I can't say it was just easy to watch show in that sense. There were points where the crowd was louder than other points, but yeah, I don't know the eternal answer of growing at this level for an Impact or for an NWA that have just announced a pay-per-view for June, or your MLWs of the world. And I would include New Japan. Like, is Wrestling Dontaku on Sunday going to be the level of event that a fan base is going to be going out in droves to be watching? I thought of it over the weekend as well. Like, I think Bellator is in the same spot in MMA, where you have so much UFC content that it's impossible to keep up with UFC if you're watching all the prelims and main cards, unless you're an Eric Marcotte. And Bellator is running back-to-back nights, and I'm sure financially it makes some sense you're going all the way to Hawaii, let's do 2 shows instead of 1, but they're very much off the radar, and it's such a gap between UFC towards Bellator and PFL and everyone else that unless you're like a diehard MMA fan, there's no way you're keeping up with all of this. And there's so much out there. How do you bridge that gap? Or instead of bridging the gap, just making sure that in your lane, you can make a profitable business out of it. Because I think like Bellator being on Showtime, they're great in terms of their history of combat sports and promoting, but it's also like a very small audience that is watching on Showtime compared to like their heyday on Spike TV. And the same with Impact on the same broadcaster.
Yeah. Well, we're ultimately talking about, it's hard to not use racing analogies. You just said lane, and I just almost kind of chuckled. But there ultimately is a race for number one when it comes to audiences' attentions and whatnot. But for Bellator, for an Impact, I mean, is the goal necessarily to be number one or even number two? Or is the goal simply profitability?
I would say profitability. That should be first and foremost your biggest objective. Like, no one here is expecting these companies to tackle WWE. I don't think anyone is looking at AEW to tackle WWE anytime soon. It's simply having a sustainable business on your own. And, and as it relates to the unique nature of Impact being owned by a company where this is not just Impact on its own, looking at its profits and losses. It's serving many functions under Anthem, the primary one being, programming that it does not have to go spend elsewhere for. You had a chance, as did I, I saw bits and pieces. You saw the 30-count pinfall match between Shingo Takagi and Taichi earlier today in Hiroshima. They had over 1,100 fans in attendance, and Shingo Takagi won with the concept of this match was that you had to get a combined count of 30 over the course of this match, and with Taichi up 28-24, Shingo Takagi hit Last of the Dragon, and the referee registered a 6 count, getting Takagi to 30 and winning. What was it? 30-29 in the end is what the final score was.
30-29. Yes, exactly. Yeah, it was not an MMA score, everybody. It was a professional wrestling score. Yeah. This of course piqued my interest because of the craziness, or at least sort of like the to me, the KOPW title is the experimental title. It is the title where every single match you try something different, and eventually hope that something sticks. And also because of the participants involved, the fact that it's Shingo Takagi, we knew we weren't just going to get some sort of Toriano, comedy fest. Maybe you were, but this ended up not being that. I was pleasantly surprised, John. Like, I found it pretty enticing. What did you think?
I mean, I didn't get to see the whole thing. Once I saw it was 26 minutes, I knew I wouldn't have the time to watch everything. But, watching like the final few minutes, it did seem like the audience was as heated as they're going to sound at a show in New Japan at the moment.
Right. So the idea and what ultimately made it novel to me was that they start the match off pretty similarly to most matches, right? And it keeps going until you get your first near fall. And they do have the clock, or at least the tally,
Yes.
the scoreboard on the corner of the screen. So
And they were making frequent announcements to the live crowd too, so they understood because I
the
don't
live
know
crowd
if they,
could also see it as well.
oh,
It was
they
on
did have the
Tron.
graphic. That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, yeah. So every near fall, every 1 count, every 2 count gets added to the tally. And that to me is a pretty novel concept for pro wrestling because it meant every near fall meant something. That is something I've always had an issue with pro wrestling, where it's like when you understand the pattern of a match, especially when it comes to New Japan, you know that nothing really matters in the New Japan main event until you watch the final 5 minutes. Well, this is not really the case. Every single portion matters, and adds to the top, and that's something that other sports have an advantage for that professional wrestling doesn't necessarily. So that was kind of unique. What I was curious about is what would happen when somebody hits a finisher and you go beyond a 3 count. Do they stop at a 3 count? No.
They keep going.
Like, Taichi in the middle hits the Black Mephisto, which is his finisher, and we get a 6 count, something like a 6 count, which is cool. Like, to me, I've always like had the
And
question
it's
in my
logical.
head.
Like the finisher should have that kind of impact. Like you don't want to have the guy just kicking out at 4.
Yeah, I've always had the question in my head. Okay, like, hey, what's more powerful, the Stone Cold Stunner or like a Shawn Michaels super kick? We never really know because ultimately those put people down for 3 counts, and that's really it. Now you actually have a measurement of how long somebody could accurately stay down for a count in a format like this. So Black Mephisto gets somebody down for 5. I believe it was something like I don't know, like the what is it? Last of the Dragon or something. Put him down for maybe 5 or something like that. I don't know.
I think it was 6 at the end.
6
He was at 24, and that won him the match.
Right, okay. Maybe it was the pumping bomber. Anyway, you got some form of measurement that I thought was really unique for professional wrestling. To me, the most interesting part of it, though, was at the very end of the match where Taichi was up 29-23. And at this point, Shingo Takagi cannot even afford a 1 count, okay? So he's taking these moves, and he has to dig deep within himself to kick out before even the count of 1. As soon as like Taichi is on him, he's like jumping up. He's doing the New Japan no sell, like, and then he's firing up, mustering enough to barrage him for the end. Hits the Last of the Dragon, and that's enough for basically infinity because Taichi doesn't get up after that. And I thought it was really satisfying and got something, like created a unique form of storytelling for an art form that we've really pretty much seen everything coming out of it. And by the end of the match, 26 minutes, both of them are completely exhausted because they've taken multiple finishers from each other. To me, it's the equivalent of like, a boxing match where a boxer gets knocked out, you count to 10, and then they have to get back up and they have to keep wrestling. So I like the idea. I don't know if they'll continue with it at all, but like it shows you that, in the hands of creative people and people who take it seriously, there's some value to this King of Pro Wrestling Championship.
Yeah, I would say, like, again, not watching the entire match, that it seemed like the concept was something certainly worth trying out. And I think that's the best you can hope for this King of Pro Wrestling title, is especially when they get away from the comedy stuff into stuff that could actually be implemented, that is a new wrinkle to pro wrestling, that is interesting, instead of just it's never been done before. And yeah, there's probably a reason for that. This seemed like something that you could revisit or take little things that, again, incorporating near falls into having some actual objective point to the match, rather than just someone eating constant kicking out of 2 counts and it means nothing in the context of the match. There actually is a penalty for that.
And Shingo now as champion, you would hope that it takes a more serious edge to this concept. And I hope the days of like your Yano comedy matches being the only thing that you see from this King of Pro Wrestling Championship are gone.
Maybe he can stamp out Toru Yano from this division by he gets one more rematch and he loses with an immediate Last of the Dragon and a 30 count, and he loses in 30 seconds.
That would be pretty funny, actually.
Just imagine the referee being
Yeah.
blown up after the count of 30. So there you go. That was from today's show. They have 2 more smaller shows this week before Wrestling Dontaku on Sunday in Fukuoka with Okada against Naito in the main event of that show. Tonight, Raw takes place from Knoxville, Tennessee. And in Canada, Sportsnet has noted that due to the Philadelphia-Chicago NHL playoff game, that Raw will be airing on OLN, which on Rogers is channel 37. You'll have to check if you're not on Rogers for what channel that is on your cable package. But this is a rare time that Raw is getting moved and to a network that I would imagine not too many people are frequenting. I won't speak for everyone, but I don't think I've ever watched OLN.
I don't think so either. It is.
I had to double check that I had it.
It is called the Outdoor Life Network, and I'm assuming people who watch on TSN on the app, or sorry, on Sportsnet on the app, are going to get it as usual. Am I correct?
Yes, it will be streaming on Sportsnet now. So if all else fails, you can watch it there. And I believe that NXT 2.0 on Tuesday night will also just be streaming because of the NHL playoffs. So Sportsnet has these commitments. So at times,
are there like 5 different Sportsnets? We can't sacrifice one of them for.
The thing is
WWE.
that like these are like regional networks as well. So it's like the idea that, you could have it, they don't air on the national Sportsnet channel. 360 is sort of that was the former Score. So it's difficult when these are all regional based unless you have a higher cable package where you get all of them.
Gotcha. Okay.
So there you go. That is happening tonight. And what we have announced is Bianca Belair defending the women's title against Sonya Deville in her hometown. A arm wrestling contest between Bobby Lashley and Omos. The return of Becky Lynch for the first time since WrestleMania. And then the Randy Orton 20th anniversary celebration. And it was on this date in 2002 that the SmackDown episode of his debut against Hardcore Holly aired. It was taped 2 nights earlier, but it did air on April the 25th of 2002. And given that over the weekend, it was announced that Impact's Slammiversary show will take place on the exact date of its anniversary. My question to you, Wei, is that in 2002, what was more likely? 20 years later, Impact would still be around, or that Randy Orton, given all of this man's ups and downs in WWE, would still be wrestling on TV every week in trunks?
Those are both, I think, incredible feats. For 20 years, I would say 20 years ago, both would probably be equally as unlikely.
There was a time with Orton where the idea of this guy getting cut, despite his star power, was not that far fetched. Like he had some very scary moments in his life, and and a lot of behavioral issues in WWE, especially throughout the mid 2000s.
I wouldn't even just pin it on his behavior outside of the ring, but really upon debut, he looked good, but really no better than your average wrestler. For months, after that Bob Holly match, he was just a generic guy. It wasn't until the
he was
RNN
pegged for
news.
stardom with Evolution. Like he was picked, and that has been for Randy Orton. You can talk about many highs and lows in terms of his character. At times overpushed. He's always been largely a protected character, which will come with its criticism of when a top position was warranted and when it was not. And I think there's different examples at times when he was operating as a top guy and others where he was sort of just skirting by. And you can look at, the Mick Foley program, the rated RKO run that he had. But that was also offset by, stuff that did not click. I mean, he's had some legendarily bad matches at WrestleMania.
Yeah. He's also somebody who really stands out to me for being 20 years into this company, doesn't look it. I mean, he looks in phenomenal shape. He looks as good as, as some of your recent debuts. Somebody who certainly, when you told me the Undertaker was 20 years in, yeah, okay, I could believe that. But Orton 20 years in, I mean, it seems like, on the outset, he still has quite a few years in him.
Yeah, and I think this run with Riddle, it's brought out a different side of him. It's also taken him out of the main event scene, which I think has allowed people to look at him in a different light. where, you know, he's not really a comedy character, but he plays off of a comedy character, and that's added a lot to the character and has been the example that we have always talked about of taking a main eventer, and if you can have a thriving tag division, it's a great segue for someone that you're not pushing in a singles capacity that can still have a big contribution. And I wouldn't say this division is thriving, but this tag team is, and this tag team has worked. You could not have pegged this level of success for this Riddle Orton pairing now that are a year of these two teaming.
It's a formula I think AEW have executed really well. You know, putting somebody like a Kenny Omega into the tag team division to really freshen him up, or to keep him outside of singles contention, so that eventually, when you do that, not only do you have a Kenny Omega now, but you have a Hangman Page who are perfect in their singles runs, and the same will be of Randy Orton and Matt Riddle whenever they do that eventual breakup. Both of them will be, you know, immediately brought up there if handled well. Immediately put into the main event and seeing both of them, and we all know it's coming eventually, but I'm also impressed that they've managed to hold it off for this long and have kept it hot enough this long.
Yeah, and if there's any reluctance on their part that this team has gelled so well that if we break them up, will it be something the audience rejects? Like they saw when they've tried this with the Hardys in the past in WWE. But I would say, like, if done correctly, you certainly have a big program with Riddle, and you have the to me can't miss one with Cody down the road when you're ready to pull the trigger on that one, especially if you're keeping Cody away from the title picture. Randy, to me, would be a destination point for Cody, and that's a major program on Raw.
It seems good enough for WrestleMania, you know, like barring, you know, Cody stays a babyface, Orton at that point maybe as a heel, but in any case, like the first time those two meet again in the future, I mean, that's a WrestleMania worthy level match. So we'll see how long, you know, this team sticks around for.
All right. Well, Wai,
we have a super chat.
I was going to say, anything super going on?
Okay, sorry to cut you off, but we do. Yes, we got a Jake from the Windy City who says, I would love an F1 podcast with Wai and Dan Levransky.
Thanks.
Well, first of all, yeah, I mean, John knows as
King
much
of the
about
compliments
F1.
here, Jake.
John knows about as much about F1 at this point as I do, so I don't know how I'd be more qualified, but maybe he means thanks to time because he knows how busy you are, John. But I didn't know. Is Dan a fan? I didn't even know that.
Oh,
I didn't know that.
Huge. Yeah, he was. Wow. He always has kept up with F1 since I met him. Yeah.
Wow, I had no idea.
I don't know if like he's super into it currently or not, but I mean, it was always something that he followed. Yeah.
I got to send a message to him about it.
All right. Well, there you go. Those are the super chats. I do want to mention at the end here for our schedule this week. So we're back tonight with Rewind to Raw. We'll be live minutes after Raw ends right here on the YouTube channel. Tuesday, we have the Ask Away mailbag show, and you can still submit questions. If you go to forum.postwrestling.com, the Ask Away question thread is there, and we will be answering all of your questions. That will be a show for Cafe members. And also on Tuesday, no Up Next on Tuesday, but instead that will be coming out on Thursday, as Davey is traveling home this week to Canada, and him and Braden will be doing a show on Thursday covering NXT and AEW Dynamite.
An in-person reunion with the BDE for the first time on Thursday. I'm very much looking forward to it. They'll be talking a whole lot of stuff, I'm sure. So we wish Davey Portman safe travels. One more super chat to fit in here at the very end from our friend Felipe from Chile, who sends 1,000 Chilean pesos. He says, what a bad weekend for Ferrari. LOL. Greeting, guys. Yes.
Carlos Sainz Jr. What a rough start. Turn 2.
Yeah, of course. You know, anytime you know, you have a race in Italy, of course the Italians are cheering for Ferrari. So not a good weekend.
Did you hear like these maniacs? They're like the excitement level of the broadcasters that there's rain. There's rain. It's this idea of like, oh my God, what can we see here?
Well, they call it the great equalizer, right? Because I mean, you know, anybody can slip, and it's
all based on feel.
Exactly. Yeah. Wet tires. Is it time for wet? Is it time for the dry tires?
Yeah.
It's fascinating. Yeah. There's so much strategy that goes into it.
Who did it take? It was Daniel Ricciardo. He wasn't taken out of the race, but he was involved in the collision at the beginning.
He
correct?
was the one who did the taking out.
That's right. Yeah. He did not have a good race either.
No. But the season's still young.
Yes. All right. Well, thanks everyone for the super chats. We are back tonight. Rewind to Raw. Subscribe here to the channel. Give it a thumbs up. and tell all your F1 fans, listen to these two fools talking about F1 racing for 10 minutes at the start of the week.
Yes.
I could
Your
sign
number
off on
one
that.
coverage, your greatest source of insight and knowledge and analysis for F1 racing right here.
Yes, it is like war planning. Let's cripple them, as the great Toto Wolff said. That is it for us. Goodbye. Thank you for tuning into the Post Daily News Show.